Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we add 2 billion new people to the planet, and that adds to the 7+ billion we already have here, we're talking about how we're going to take care of the basic human needs that we have, the food, the fuel, the fiber, all the basic infrastructure, the roads, the ports, the aircraft, all the things that are needed. But one of those things, of course, is energy. And even if water is the staff of life and it's the essence, how do we get to it? How do we purify it and bring it to people that we need? And so one of the big movements over the last 5 or 6 years has been this whole discussion of fracking and also flaring as it relates to the fracking process that's going on. And we have 2 experts that are sitting here. We're going to talk about this from the standpoint of fact and fiction and what does it really mean. Sitting right beside me is Robert Van Leer Hartwell, goes by Rob. Rob, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. He's
the president of Hartwell Capital Consulting, and Dr. William S. Rees, Jr., who is the managing director of Efkaria. I hope I got that right, Will.
Thank you, Sam.
And he goes by Will. And so we're going to have these 2 gentlemen talking with us about this whole notion of fracking. And Rob, tell us what is the nature of your company and how you were led into this thing.
Yeah, Sam. I actually was a Capitol Hill chief of staff and was on Capitol Hill for 13 years. And it's at the time when I was on the Hill, I didn't really handle a lot of technologies. I was a tax expert and a healthcare expert. But my interests have always been in the environment, and because of my mother's role in preserving habitat for the American bald eagle.
Well, I know you have a very long history of your family being in Virginia and being involved in environmental concerns, and so it's really good you're continuing this tradition established by actually going back to your grandfather, I think, in those days.
He was an avid outdoorsman in Danville, Virginia. In any case, I evolved from lobbying, traditional lobbying, and moved into technologies and finding the best environmental technologies that there were to try to solve some of the problems that we're having in our society in producing energy. It's worked very well in terms of finding new sources of cleaning up the environment.
Okay, fantastic. Will, you have a very interesting name for your company. Give us the origin of that. But then we want to start getting into this topic of fracking. What does it mean, and what is it, and what isn't it?
So Efkaria comes from ancient Greek. It's one of the 2 words for timing, chronos, from what we get chronometer, and chronology was the other one. But Efkaria is more one of opportunity as a rough translation, or good weather sometimes. You look around, you survey the scenes, and you find the opportunity. And that was the name that we gave to the company when we set it up a couple of years ago. And looking at opportunities, one of the ones that certainly has presented itself recently and is an emerging area is in the one of alternative energies, as well as the environmental concerns that go with some of those alternative energies.
Well, looking at this diagram we have here, people think of fracking as kind of you throw something, stick out your back window, and all of a sudden you're able to come up with some natural gas of oil. And as this very complicated graph is showing us here, it's much more complicated than that. So what are we really looking at here, Will, and how does that relate to both generating energy, but also the environment?
So first of all, it's not a new process. It's been in the news a lot lately, but it's been practiced commercially in the United States for at least 50 or 60 years. And it's also not a very narrow process. It's been used in about 90% of the wells that are in the United States over that period of time recently for getting a lot of our liquid hydrocarbons. What it is that is somewhat new about it is the ability to use it to extract gas out of shale that is 1 to 2 miles deep. A common misunderstanding of folks is that fracking occurs in the near surface region, close to where they're just walking around on the ground. And as this shows, it's typically 7 Empire State Buildings down.
Now let's bring up this. Let's bring up a full scale of this so we can actually see the diagram of this. This is really incredible. If we can bring it, there you go.
And they drill down horizontal about a mile or sometimes 2, and then they vertical, and then they turn over and drill horizontal another mile perhaps. And then you go in and you have fracking. And so now you're dealing with very different scales. You're talking about miles for the vertical or horizontal scales, and then the cracks are on the size of a grain of sand. They're very, very tiny cracks that are created.
That's amazing. So how does fracking fit into this? Why is it called fracking?
So it is one type of enhanced recovery from an oil well. You remember the old photos of gushers when they just poke a hole in the ground in Oklahoma and oil would come flying up out of the top?
Or Pennsylvania back in the early days?
There you go. Well, that's when you get the petroleum out of the ground under its natural reservoir pressure. Then sometimes you can just put a little bit of a pump on the top of it and you can have a pump jack and you can pull a little bit more out. Then you get to the stage where you need to do some type of enhanced recovery. And a good way of doing that is you just pump a lot of water under high pressure. You put lots of water in the well, you put it under high pressure, and it creates these cracks that are about the size of a grain of sand. In fact, they use a grain of sand to prop them open. It's called proppant.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually with sand.
It is used with sand as a common ingredient when you release the water pressure back up to the wellhead. You don't want the crack to close up, you want it to stay open. And so the number one ingredient in fracking is water, typically 90, 95, sometimes as much as 97 or 8%. The number 2 ingredient is sand, 2-3% sometimes at most. So you've got 99 plus 99.5% of the ingredients with water and sand.
Now, one of the discussions about this, of course, is they're using some kind of harsh chemicals as that 1/2% or what have you, and understand that now they actually have natural proteins that they can inject and put into the sand and water mix. So whatever goes down there is all natural, and they come out. It's much less easier to filter whatever you may need to do to treat the water. Is that actually what's happening in the industry? There's progress being made as far as what's being used?
Over the last 60 years, there's been tremendous progress in worrying about the environmental concerns, both the ones that are real and the ones that are perceived that occur with fracking. And if folks are interested, they can go on the web and they can find a couple of videos of individuals from the industry drinking fracking fluid. It was not harmful to their health when they did it. There were slight changes in the quality of the ingredients that went in, and so they were food grade. Guar is one of the ingredients that you find frequently in ice cream, and they used food grade guar in the fracking mixture that they drank as opposed to industrial grade. Other than that, it's fairly harmless.
Looking at this, talking about expanding the amount of hydrocarbons available within the United States, this whole notion of self-reliance or energy independence. So how is fracking fitting into this whole schema as far as that is concerned?
A straightforward way of looking at it on the graphic that you have up is over the last decade, ignoring seasonal spikes, we've had about the same annual electricity consumption in the U.S. However, in that same period of time, the component that belongs to natural gas has more than doubled. The fraction of our electricity produced by natural gas has gone up to a number that we wouldn't have even thought about 5 to 10 years ago. What has that meant to the United States economy? It's meant that manufacturing intensive industries that require a lot of energy are now more competitive in the U.S. because the cost can come down.
And also industries are moving back into the United States as well.
So on a global scale, we have now become a net importer of jobs that relate to the manufacturing sector, and we're on the cusp of something that would have been unheard of 10 years ago, where as a nation we will globally no longer be an importer of energy, but we will be exporting energy to other countries.
Well, and this goes to that, again, self-reliance and energy independence. And of course, you see these signs all over, about this cooperation with Canada and everything that's going on there. But Rob, looking at your family, and you've been in Virginia many generations, going back, way back in history, but I know that the environment's been very near and dear to your whole family. Your mother was very actively involved as far as the environment is concerned. So how is that now? How are you using it as a springboard into looking at these issues, the fracking, the flaring, all these new efforts that are going on to become more energy independent?
Well, I was honored to have been appointed by Governor McDonald to the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin. And I've also headed up and launched a couple of nonprofit foundations, one to honor my mother's work on the environment. And that and the combination of the networking that I'd done on Capitol Hill and now into the business sector, I've run into technologies that spark my interest that I can see are going to lead to cleaning up the environment. Whether it's cleaning the fracking water that we have, whether it's separating out the oil, the chemicals, and reusing those, whether it's taking the flare gas that is lighting up North America and converting that into energy in remote locations on the spot, and making sure that we're not burning millions and tens of millions of dollars worth of hydrocarbons every day unnecessarily. Whether it's cleaning up the air and the use of diesel fuel in a lot of these remote locations for fracking to generate power. Diesel's a very dirty fuel. And if you can convert that diesel into natural gas, eliminating the emissions, that's another technology. Even going into recycling and turning waste coal into gasoline and diesel fuel energy, and taking up the millions and millions of tons of waste coal, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Virginia, and turning that into a new source of renewable energy. It's going to help the environment.
That's fantastic. We have about 30 seconds left, Will, so normally Rob always gets the last word, but since we went a little bit long, what do you see for the policy, the movement in the United States as far as moving forward in these hydrocarbons, but at the same time trying to boost the use of renewables?
I think it's going to be a blended mixture of the above. We're going to see renewables continue to hold a small market share. However, we will see advanced technologies that give greater and enhanced recovery from our existing reservoirs, and we will see more petrochemicals come out of our fields that are currently proven.
And understand there's more there than what's ever been brought out since, 1859 when they had the first gusher in Pennsylvania. Thank you for being with us as we look around the globe for these technologies and the new movement as far as how we're going to provide the energy for the world. And Rob, thank you for being with us. Will, thanks for coming back as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit ASHA.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you looking in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And again, as we add 2 billion new souls by 2050, how we're going to be able to provide the energy needs for these so that they actually are productive human beings, and at the same time to bring a comfort of life, a quality of life that in many of the countries, say in Africa, Southeast Asia, even South America, are not realizing at this time. So as we add these people, how we're going to be able to absorb and provide all the basic needs. We have a gentleman who is creating new technologies that's actually getting at this. This is Dr. Richard Joseph Roby. He's a professional engineer and president, CEO of what's called LPP Combustion, LLC. And Rick, welcome back again.
Sam, good to be here again.
And I know that you've been working nonstop on the technologies you have, but what is LLP combustion?
LPP combustion, basically what the name stands for is lean premixed pre-vaporized combustion. That's a kind of combustion that allows fuels to burn as cleanly as it possibly can, providing the cleanest energy with the least amount of pollution.
Well, looking at that, and we have this fantastic photograph that we actually took off the internet, geology.com, and this is actually talking about one of the areas where there's a major fracking area. But you and I are going to be talking about the other F of this is flaring. So what are we looking at here? I understand this is like 200 miles long by 40 miles wide. That's a huge area.
Yeah, this is the Eagle Ford area of Texas, which is one of the big major fracking fields in the United States. And what you can see from space is the light of all the fracking rigs and all the flares that are being used to flare the gases that can't be properly harvested and used at the well sites.
Now looking at this, let's bring this up if we can, the photograph in full light so we can see this. So we see this huge long stream, as I was told it was 200 miles long by about 40 miles wide. Why are we taking a precious natural resource, fossil fuel, and then we're just burning it and putting it to the environment?
Well, the problem is that there are two products that we're usually going after when we go through fracking. One is natural gas, which is primarily methane, and the other is a form of crude oil that we can then ultimately produce into gasoline and heating oil, jet fuel, all those kinds of things. The problem is whether you're going for natural gas or for the oil, there's some hydrocarbons that sort of fit into the cracks between them in terms of fuel, and they don't work very well in most combustion systems. So since that's not really what we're trying to harvest, it ends up being sort of a byproduct that there's no immediate use for, and to get rid of it, we flare it.
Okay, but this is becoming a big no-no around the whole globe as far as environmental change is happening at a very rapid rate. And at the same time, my understanding it's over $100 million per month, I think is what the research said, of natural gas being flared in the Bakken shale oil deposit area. You know, that's a lot of money.
Correct. So, I mean, just in the Bakken field in North Dakota, about $100 million of hydrocarbons per month are being flared. And so not only is that causing pollution, it's causing the light that you see from outer space, but it's also a wasted resource.
Well, looking at it, and I know this goes to the heart of your technology, and we have these different flames here and the heat that's being used, and also actually the amount of waste that we're actually providing, I guess, to the environment by not being able to very efficiently burn and use the fuel that we're bringing up.
Correct. So right now, most of the fuel that's being used for fracking is diesel fuel. And diesel fuel is burned as a spray liquid, if you've seen an old oil burner, and it's kind of like the orange brushy flame that everybody's used to seeing, kind of a candle flame. That flame is very polluting. The natural gas flame that people like, the nice blue flame, is actually very clean. And so the flares that we see are indicative of that dirtier kind of flame. And what our technology does is it takes the kind of liquid gas mixture that's not readily burned in any conventional engine and converts it into a natural gas substitute that can then be burned in gas turbines as cleanly as natural gas and give us that same blue flame instead of the dirty orange flame that's coming off the flares.
Okay, so we have the solution that we're looking at right here. We're going to go back to the problem, of course, that we're looking at here. So how then does LLP combustion match the problem that we have, that we're seeing from these satellite photographs, in order to get over here so it can be used, but it's used for something that's very beneficial to society, reducing the impact on the environment, but also providing more energy efficiency within the economic system so that people can produce goods faster, better, and less costly.
Yeah, so it provides both economic benefits and pollution benefits. So if we stop flaring those gases and burn them much more cleanly, but not just to burn them, for power generation, our technology would allow you to take those flared gases and liquids and burn them for gas turbine power to produce electricity that can either be used at the well sites to power the wells instead of the diesel engines that are much dirtier, or to put extra power on the grid that can run households or businesses.
Well, looking at this this diagram here, what are we looking at? We know what the flare looks like. We see the wellhead over to the extreme left of this, and then we want to be able to make use of this both within the operations, the fracking operations themselves, and to use in the general society. So how do we match that up?
So what we can do with our technology, we can take those gas liquid mixtures that are currently going up in smoke literally in the flare and put them through our LPP combustion system. It's a fuel processing system that takes those, mixes them with nitrogen, and converts them into a gas that to the gas turbine looks just like natural gas. And so it burns just as cleanly as natural gas and produces electricity just like natural gas. So instead of going up in smoke, we literally get very clean power.
Now, looking at this, we're saying that it's over 100 million per month natural gas being flared up in the Bakken, but you have this shale oil being produced now all over the United States, actually all over the globe. So it's millions of cubic feet of this natural gas is being flared. So what would be the long-term economic benefit from actually using this type of process that you have?
So if we could capture just a fraction of what's literally going up in smoke now, we could produce gigawatts of power. A gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts, and that would be a typical commercial power plant to run a major city, would be a gigawatt power plant. So we can take these locations throughout the world and turn them into power producing instead of just creating pollution, hot air, and additional CO2 for no benefit.
Now, looking at this, so many of these are actually in isolated areas. Many of them are not adjacent to the national grid, whether it's here or Nigeria or Saudi Arabia and other places. So what's going to be the way to capture all of this, then process it, and then actually put it into the grid or to the manufacturing facility directly so it actually has a long-term benefit?
Well, there are two things that we can do. In the short term, we can start reducing the flaring by using that as a substitute for the power that they're generating with diesel engines. So instead of trucking in diesel fuel over long distances with big trucks, resulting in fuel spills and the pollution from the diesel engines, we can actually use what's currently going into the flares to produce the local electricity. So that's a start. Over time, in order to capture these liquids, you have to put in tremendous amount of piping to be able to get the liquids to market if you're going to stop flaring them. But it's a lot easier to hang electrical wires than it is to construct pipelines. And so if we can put the power generation where the fuel is, then we can use electric lines to get them from some of these remote locations into the grid and into areas where people can use them.
So what you're talking about, Rick, is actually you produce this. And I understand you actually have some of your medium to even large size production equipment is on skids, where you can actually put it out and very quickly install and then be able to plug into, I guess, to the grid, or to then start using it on site at the fracking areas itself.
Yeah, some of our systems that are a combination of our LPP combustion skid and a gas turbine actually can be tractor trailer mounted, because as you know, these well sites move from time to time. You drill one well and then you move down the road and drill another well. So the demand for the power moves, and that would allow the power production units to move with them. And then over time, you can actually install some of these systems permanently and hook into the grid and provide ongoing power to the grid.
So looking at the system that we have here, is it difficult to do all of this, or is it very quickly as the wells move and the drilling starts? Actually, these skids can go with them and they very quickly can be reconnected and start producing almost immediately, or there's some lag time?
No, it can be done in very short order. There are commercial gas turbines from the tens of kilowatts up to the tens of megawatts made by major manufacturers that are already tractor trailer mounted, and we've designed LPP combustion skids that are also tractor trailer mounted that can go right along with them. So it makes these power systems mobile and makes them much more useful that way, to be able to follow the wells and follow the flare gases and take them and use them for power generation.
How does this benefit the driller themselves? They're on site, they're producing, instead of flaring now, they're all of a sudden using their own energy that's right there. So what is either the cost savings and then of course the benefit to the consumer and the environment?
Well, the cost savings is actually enormous, because right now to truck in diesel fuel over a long distance and then produce power with diesel engines generates a very expensive electricity. We, using the flare gas, which is essentially a free fuel because it's just going up in smoke, can reduce the cost of the electricity by about a factor of 3 or 4.
My goodness, you want to state that again?
Yes, so we can reduce the cost of the electricity at the well sites by about a factor of 3 or 4.
That's incredible.
There's a huge economic incentive, but there's also other production incentives, because there's a lot of logistics involved in moving that much diesel fuel around and moving the diesel generators around. Because we're using fuel that's right there, we reduce what people would call the logistical tail and make it easier for the next well to be drilled and to be fracked and to be produced.
And then also at the same time, we're actually taking the burden off of the grid system as far as producing the diesel, which is being not only trucked in, but it's being brought from somewhere else. Much of it may be even imported into the United States. So there's a lot of benefits to all this. And then, of course, that goes to reducing the cost to the consumer.
So there are economic benefits, there are pollution consideration benefits, and the economic benefits are both in reduced cost and in better electricity for businesses and people.
Well, thank you very much, Rick Roby, President of LLP Combustion. Thank you as we create the Emerald Planet. Hello, dear viewers. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, President and Executive Director of Emerald Planet and the Director and host of the Emerald Planet Inside Scoop television program, which we bring you each week. Emerald Planet is an international non-for-profit organization dedicated to identifying and sharing the 1,000 best practices in sustainable environmental and economic development across the globe. We are linking those who have successfully developed or discovered the latest advances to those in need. In spring 2014, Emerald Planet will begin its most ambitious project to date. Called the Emerald Trek, we will visit 144 countries over a 5-year period. Now, we need your help. As you may imagine, a historic journey of this depth and breadth is expensive. Please go to our website, www.emerald-planet.org, and press the donate button. That's www.emerald-planet.org and press the donate button. You can use your credit card or a check to support the Emerald Trek. All donations, large and small, will be most welcomed. Emerald Planet and I thank you.
Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, and thank you for being with us on the Emerald Planet as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are going to take care of a planet that will have about 9 billion people. Yes, 9 billion people by 2050. And so we talk about water, we talk about the food, the fuel, the fiber, and now we have a topic that actually is the juxtaposition of all of this. And so we've been looking for experts that come and talk about the notion of fracking and flaring because there's much discussion about this and among the public people within the United States as well as around the globe. And I'm going to have to, Scott, read this big long introduction he has here. This is quite a title this gentleman has. It's Dr. Scott W. Tinker. He's a state geologist for the state of Texas. He's a professor in the Edwin Allday Endowed Chair in Subsurface Geology. We'll come back to that one. And the Jackson School of Geosciences at the University of Texas in Austin. Whew, that's a long title. Of course, I had to throw it all in. Yeah, that's why we were doing this. But anyway, Scott, welcome.
Thanks.
Glad to have you here from Texas, and thank you for joining the Emerald Planet. And to come in studio, I mean, that's quite a sacrifice. But you have this prestigious chair. You're at the university, but you're also the state geologist. I mean, one of those is a full-time employed, so I don't know what your salary is, but hopefully it's commensurate with the work that you're doing. But right now, you're really at the nexus of really what's going on as the future of energy. Looking at fracking and flaring, you know, the hydrocarbons we're bringing out of the ground, finding more than what we even knew existed, 5 or 10 years ago. But at the same time, to address the issues of good water. Mm-hmm. So looking at all this work you're doing, how do you balance all of this? And then we want to get into what's fracking, and then how do we protect the environment while we're trying to extract the hydrocarbons as a bridge into renewables?
Sure. Well, we academics need a lot of titles to feel secure, Sam. So I apologize for that.
Well, I know this right here means that you have tenure, so you'll be okay.
But, it is lots of hats, and at the university, I have a big group, 250 people, and we're looking at energy and environmental and economic research and how those things all work together globally. Mm-hmm. It's really important to the extent we can to be objective as academics. I think the world depends on us to remove our biases to the extent we can, be objective and look at things as candidly as we can. The state geologist role is a different one. There's one for every state. We think of ourselves like governors without any money or authority. but we do focus a lot as state geologists on the environment and energy and resources and how that all plays out both at the local and state level and then work federally. So it's fun to bring that all together and see how they play well.
Yeah. Well, and what you're doing is what Emerald Planet's all about, looking at environmental and economic development. And we've always said is if you don't address the economic issues, people will be able to have jobs, they can pay and take care of their families and go to school and do all these things that are necessary. And now that we're adding 2 billion more people, to the population base, we've got to get very serious about this as far as energy is concerned. Right. But at the same time, to be able to protect the water. So looking at fracking, maybe just describe what it is, and we have this very interesting slide right here, and we'll spend a little time on this. Sure. And then how does this interrelate 1, 2, 3 miles below the surface as far as this interplay between the hydrocarbons and water?
Right. Well, the process of hydraulic fracturing is injecting fluids at pressure and cracking rock. And it's been around for over half a century, done in vertical wells. Now, today, those wells are drilled horizontally and then fracked, so those have come together. And the process breaks rock. If you were to look at a piece of shale and polish it up, you could put it on your kitchen counter, and you wouldn't feel too bad about slicing a ham or cheese on there. It's that tight looking. And so to get the hydrocarbons to flow from that, oil and natural gas, you have to crack it. And that's what hydraulic fracturing does. The pores in those reservoirs and those shales are so small. I'll use the term nanometers. It means 1/1000th of a meter. It doesn't mean much. But the figure that you can see shows those little black holes. And if you shrink them down onto a human hair, there might be 100 to 1,000 of those, the width of the hair.
This is incredible. Let's bring this slide up so we can see it, because this really is on the side of this. This is the human hair, and then this is actually where I understand all the hydrocarbons. Is that where this darker area is, and where we have those red dots?
Those are the tiny little pores, and they're much smaller than anything the oil and gas industry has dealt with before. So larger pores, which aren't very big, are called conventional. And these are called unconventional reservoirs because they're so small. And again, to get fluids and gas to flow out of that rock, which is kind of a grab bag of silt and organics and muds and other kinds of things. And I brought a little piece of it for you here. That's the Marcellus Shale. You have to crack it. You have to crack it and open up little microfracks for those fluids and gases to flow to the wellbore.
I'm going to see if we can get this on camera. This is something that we're kind of springing on the staff that we have here. If we can get a close-up of this.
They're going to hate me later.
Tell us what I have in my hand right here.
That's a piece of Marcellus Shale. It's a black, organic, rich mudstone. And again, if you were to polish that up, you can see it would almost looks like a slate or marble that you might find on a kitchen counter.
That's why they call it the shale. I tell you, this is just amazing to think that, now there's billions of barrels of oil under there that we didn't know about, we meaning society.
Right.
And then billions of cubic square meters of natural gas. So why did it go so long to be undetected at this massive level? I mean, we've been doing this going back almost to the war, but all of a sudden it seems like it's just sprung onto society that we have this availability.
It does seem sudden to society, but it's really been an evolution. Even as you were drilling through shales 50 to 100 years ago, you could see natural gas and liquids in those shales. There was just no way to produce them economically.
Okay,
so that's the challenge.
So looking at that, we have this chart. Tell us what we're looking at here, and this relates to the oil, and then we'll put up the natural gas.
Sure. This is not a forecast. This is actual production of oil from shale in the United States, from tight and shale rocks. And so you can see back 2007, very little. That's a very short time in terms of energy transitions. Now it represents over 2 million barrels of oil a day from these shale and tight rocks. That's approaching 25 to 30% of U.S. production.
Now, looking at this, this is what you're doing as far as at your university and the Jackson School there, this balance between the economy and the environment. So now we've talked about the environment. We're bringing that out. We're going to try to protect that. But what does it mean to the economy that we're now actually producing 2 billion barrels of oil out of this?
2 million barrels a day. So that's 1 million barrels is about what we import from Saudi Arabia. So if you start to think about 2 million heading toward 3 and potentially 4 million barrels a day, that's a remarkable access to liquid fuels. And oil is really the dominant fuel for transportation. So it provides the U.S. with the transportation fuel for a while, not forever. And it's very important to...
And we're going to come to that very topic with the renewables. So that's where we're headed in all this.
So it's not forever, but it buys us some time.
And I think this is what we need to look at. This is really a bridge as we see it, and this is going to the natural gas. Tell us about this, and this is really the same timeline, roughly 2007 and on.
It is, and natural gas actually led oil. So the hydraulic fracturing in shale was done in natural gas first. The molecules are much smaller. A methane molecule is much smaller than a big complex hydrocarbon. So it flows out more easily. The price of natural gas today in the world, if you go to Asia or Europe, may be $10 to $14 an MCF. Here, it went as low as the high $2. It's now back around $4. So it's not a fungible global commodity. We don't move it around the world efficiently like oil. So the price differentials exist. And the development of shale gas has allowed the U.S. to create a resource here that didn't exist before, that's economic, and feeds into so many other things that drive our economy.
Since we know, or the public really understands more about the oil than probably the natural gas right now, how is this actually allowing the economy to stabilize itself and actually start to grow again by having access to all this new hydrocarbons within the borders of the United States?
Well, there's two big energy drivers to economy. One is electricity and the fuels that make it, and one is transportation. Oil is big in transportation. So whereas we were importing a tremendous amount of oil up to over 60% not long ago, that's come back down below 50%, it's going toward 40%. Whether or not we'll ever produce enough to be independent is really not a topic that I find that relevant. I think the interesting thing is the oil is allowing us, again, to bridge our transportation systems out over several decades.
Right. Now, looking at that, too, as far as the oil, then we'll come to the natural gas, because that's what's going into generating electricity. Again, I think as a bridge, as we try to take the renewables, how is this allowing us to invest in the renewables and also to protect the environment?
Right. Yeah, if you look at investment in the renewables, it requires a healthy economy. So this dance goes on. Energy, the economy, and the environment, it's a waltz. And if you go too far out toward any one of those corners, you step on the toes of the dance partner and the others can suffer. And you can pick up the paper every single day. If you see an unhealthy economy, we're not investing in the environment. Energy underpins the economy. So that dance goes on, and having access to our own resources, both oil and natural gas this way, again, has really bolstered our economy. You start to read below the lines and within the lines a little bit of our economic recovery, a lot of it's underpinned by energy.
Yeah, and this is going on in areas before, like in Wyoming, North Dakota, all these areas that were so isolated in many ways are now becoming, within the mainstream, and New York City and Atlanta, Georgia, and Chicago, Illinois are all becoming dependent on these far-flung areas within the borders of the United States. We have about a minute, actually a little less than a minute left, Scott. What do you see for the future, and how is all this going to help us as far as both the economy and the environment?
Yeah, again, natural gas being a great power generation fuel, it backstops renewable energies. So it's a terrific fuel to help us bridge out to that alternative energy future. We need to use it wisely. We need to be objective about it, not get too far in our corners, and really look at the facts and leverage what we know today to develop these energies for the future.
Well, Dr. Scott W. Tinker, all the way from Texas, we're certainly glad to have you, the state geologist from the state of Texas, also endowed chair at the University of Texas at Austin. You've really been very enlightening and have shared much with our viewers. And thank you for being with us as we look at this very important topic of fracking, new hydrocarbons and renewables as we create the Emerald Planet.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo. I would like to speak English better. Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
El Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals,
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
are a small part of what we do.
Son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia.
Comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
Ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Hey, Leanne. Where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
Back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you each week from Washington, D.C. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President, Executive Director of Emerald Planet and Director and host for the Emerald Planet TV. We're looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking at the very best practices, as we call the best of the best, to make sure that we're actually sharing around the globe with the some 7 billion people that are here right now and the 2 billion new people we'll be adding by 2050 as how we're going to be able to take care of all these mouths and all the needs for the food, the fuel, the fiber, and at the same time to increase the standard of living. And so we have two experts joining us right now. One's going to come into us by Skype, coming from West Virginia. This is Dr. Jason Harmon. He is an environmental resources analyst for the state of West Virginia, coming by Skype. And sitting right beside me is Robert Van Leer Hartwell, president of Hartwell Capital Consulting. And he's very much involved as far as looking at all these various topics, both from the funding side of that as well as the technology. But we're going to go to Jason first. Jason, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Glad to have you in here with us. And I know that in West Virginia, your critical role is to help to protect the environment, to increase the water resources you have, but at the same time to expand the economy. And this is really a delicate balance that you have in your position. How do you do all of this?
Oh, it's definitely a balance. I'd like to say that what my job is in 2011, in response to the public concern regarding the waters being used for fracking, the legislature passed the Horizontal Well Control Act, which requires that all horizontal well work permits are accompanied by a water management plan, which identifies all potential water sources. So my role is to review those sources and to set thresholds. Now, the minimum withdrawal thresholds that we set are based on historic flows, as well as some operational details that the operators have to provide us, and also existing demands. So in that way, we're more able to review the plans, assess what's going on, and also do what is best for the environment.
Okay, I think that's very important. As you know, Emerald Planet is all about this balance between the environment and economic development. It's very necessary to have both of these and try to keep a balance. We're going to come up with some of these slides that you shared with us, and since this is a new topic we've never talked about before on Emerald Planet, we'll just kind of go through these. Jason, if you don't mind, I'll be asking you some questions, but tell us what we're looking at in each of these, the importance of it as far as extracting the hydrocarbons to be able to be used in society, but at the same time how we're using this technology and your good offices to be sure that we're protecting the environment at the same time. So let's just start with this first slide. What are we looking at and what's the importance?
This is what's referred to as a tank battery. And this tank battery in particular is holding recycled frac water. So this is water that has been injected downhole and returned to the surface and collected for reuse. These tank batteries can and often do hold fresh water. Quite simply, it's a storage device. It's pretty large in scope, as you may be able to tell. I think that each one of these tanks holds approximately about 20,000 gallons of water.
Now, what are they actually, once the water comes back up out of the well hole, this is actually then is going to be filtered in some way and then re-injected back into the groundwater, or what is going to happen to the water it's actually once it comes back out of the ground?
Often it's used in its raw form, reused rather, in its raw form in a future injection. It's commonly, and now it's not always the case, but commonly the water doesn't require any further treatments in order to meet the quality concerns to be injected downhole again.
Okay, and this next slide, what are we seeing here?
This is an in-stream flow measuring device installed by one particular company. That this allows them to monitor the flows. You know, as I said, my responsibility is setting minimum flow criteria. And this device has been calibrated to tell the operator exactly when the levels in the stream equate to the required flows.
So this is something that you predetermine before you're actually issuing the permit, if I understood your preamble in the beginning. And so as long as the flow meets the needs that's been set by you in the state of West Virginia, then they'll be able to withdraw the water. If not, then what do? Do they just wait, or do they bring other water in to be able to continue their fracking process?
Well, the key to any adequate water management plan is alternate sources. And in the event flows at this particular location would not be available, an alternate source would be used. Now, that could be a municipal supply or trucked water from a farther away location.
But as we understand it, water really is an essential part of the fracking process, and I think this is part of the discussion and challenge that the industry has vis-a-vis the public perception as far as are we going too far in one way or the other, the hydrocarbons for the water for the hydrocarbons. And so it's a very interesting dance that's going on in West Virginia and all the states, Jason. This next looks like an area. Would this be one of those alternative sources of water?
Well, what you're looking at here is it's a pretty standard setup for a surface water withdrawal. Here are two mobile pumps that have probably 8 to 10 inch lines running into the stream. And at the, not shown here, but at the end of those pipes will be a screen structure in order to prevent the entrainment or impingement of fish or other aquatic life. But this is your standard surface water withdrawal site. From this point, they would pump water into tanks, for instance, the tank batteries that you saw, or pumping them into trucks and hauled to a remote location.
Now, looking at this, this really raises the question I know that probably some of our viewers have. If we're pumping this much water out and it's going in to be used in this fracking process to bring up these hydrocarbons, either the oil, natural gas, or both, what is that doing to the surface level of water for what human beings and their animals are going to have available to use for drinking, washing, sanitation, and all the other uses of water?
Well, with every well requiring approximately 5 million gallons of water to fracture, you can appreciate the potential impacts on the streams. And in order to mitigate the damages or reduce the impacts, we fall back on the thresholds that we set. During times when flows are higher, that's when we prefer to have the withdrawals occur. And it's very much a dance, and we set the thresholds in order to be as protective as we can.
Yeah, and that's very important. So how does this slide go to this whole cycle of water, hydrocarbons, and the public availability of water to the citizens? In many of these areas, and a lot of these are smaller rural areas that do not have a lot of economic opportunity. So what is this actually bringing to the citizens in these localities?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. For one, there's obviously an economic driver with jobs, but what we fall back on and what we try to do is protect the citizens and protect the water that they rely on to the best of our ability. And actually, this photo is very appropriate. What you're looking at here is what we refer to as a centralized impoundment. And it's a vast structure. The photo itself doesn't really capture the scope, but it's a very large structure that holds millions of gallons of water. And by filling this structure when the water sources are plentiful and storing it until needed, the impacts on the local population, both citizens and the aquatic life, is reduced.
Well, I think you answered the question very brilliantly using this slide, so thank you, Jason, because the state really is planning to balance this as far as the use is concerned. And we have one last slide, and then, as you know, Rob is sitting right beside me, and I'm going to let him ask a question, and since we've been able to keep you on Skype with no problem, is this actually a well itself?
This is not a production well. This is, in fact, a groundwater well. And I included this slide to illustrate that potential sources of water are anything that could potentially be used. Groundwater resources in West Virginia, though, are generally not used. And in fact, this picture of this well is what was feeding the water pouring into the centralized impoundment in the last slide.
Okay, so, and then what you're doing is bring it up and then you have it. Now, going to the point, and then I'm going to go back to this slide we have over here. We've been talking about rain and water harvesting as a very old technology, 6,000 years at least around the globe in many ancient societies. And now it's becoming back to the fore because of drought conditions, all over the planet. So what is West Virginia doing as far as any type of rain or water harvesting in the abundant, or I guess we could say the overabundant times, particularly in the spring rains and maybe even the late fall or from snowpack?
Well, using harvested rainwater is a really intelligent move, and it's an essential part of a oil and gas operator's water management plan. Structures such as these, they're vast and they collect lots of rainwater just falling down. So it's possible to collect millions of gallons of water over time and it'll completely eliminate the need for state water resources.
All right, we've almost run out of time. Rob had a question. I'm going to change it on him, but we'll go to take the last question there.
Jason, 5 or 10 years from now, how do you vision the evolution of technology and government helping to ensure adequate and water supplies and the quality of the water that we have?
And it's got to be quick. We got about 15 seconds.
Okay, well, in the future, we expect to see more pipelines, actual infrastructure to bring water in from plentiful locations to these remote sources and eliminate or drastically reduce the amount of the need for the local water supply.
You couldn't have done better. Jason, thank you for being with us. This is Dr. H. Jason Harmon. He's an Environmental Resources Analyst, State of West Virginia. And Rob, thank you for being with us and being a part of all this as far as Emerald Planet is concerned. Very interesting topic. We'll have to go back to this. And thank you for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.